The last chapter in the story of this banking crisis is far from being over. So, yeah, that's what I will stick to. It's going to be the catalyst for the next problem. And it's going to start right there with rates rising and money leaving the banks, making rates rise higher, which puts more pressure on the banks. And it's just going to obliterate the whole system.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for September 11th through 18th, 2023, while supplies last. First, when you purchase a bundle of 5 10-ounce Nordic Mint bars and 5 5-ounce bars, all 10 bars are priced at just $1.89 over spot per ounce. 3/9 fine silver, these are priced lower than anything else other than full-size Comex bars, but obviously offer far better liquidity. The Gold Eagle was first released in 1986 and has been one of the most popular gold bullion coins in the world, providing incredible recognizability and investor trust. The 1/10 Eagle is additionally sought after for its high degree of flexibility and liquidity. Like the 1-ounce Eagle, the 1/10 Eagle is 22-karat gold strengthened with copper. It's 1/10 of a troy ounce of gold, comes 50 to a tube, 5,000 to a box, and is available at just $37.50 over melt while supplies last. Finally, the Gold Eagle is IRA eligible. Next, from Valcambi, a Swiss mint known for producing some of the highest quality products in precious metals, we have Kilo Silver bars, which are 32.15 troy ounces of 3/9 fine silver, cast with individual serial numbers and a beautiful antique-style finish. They are only $1.99 over spot per ounce. They come 15 to a box and are IRA eligible. And for your choice silver rounds, you may choose between the iconic Silver Buffalo round made by various private mints across the US and the Silver Asahi round from Japan. Both 3/9 fine, both 20 to a tube. The Asahi rounds are also IRA eligible. And if you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We are always delighted to have this returning guest every week for our weekly market update. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us this Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Always good to be here, Dunnigan. Thanks for having me, my man.
We're grateful for your presence here. Originally, we thought this would be just like a precious metals market update. And then, thanks to your incessant research into bigger, broader macro topics like global currencies and trade alliances and things like that, you brought out the BRICS topic. And then we couldn't help but talk about the fragility of the banking system. So that leaves banks, BRICS, and bullion that we need to get to. One thing that just came out like yesterday and the day before in the news, I just thought we can't not talk about, and that is related to something that you very personally experienced in your families. Because when we met with you in Minneapolis, having some meetings, you were talking about we've always been in Minnesota. I'm never going to leave Minnesota. It's my home, et cetera, et cetera. And then all that stuff happened in Minneapolis, and you pulled up stakes and moved to Florida. Just yesterday and the day before, we had an announcement by the governor of the state of New Mexico saying that they should temporarily suspend the Second Amendment, especially in the city of Albuquerque, where there's been some gun violence recently. And there's been thank goodness, there's been a uprising, a backlash against that unconstitutional. Even her own sheriff stood up and said, this is not going to be enforced. I'm not going to enforce this. It's unconstitutional. We need to get together and address what the underlying root causes are and not just say we're going to suspend the Constitution. There's been something similar happen in Arizona. Just wanted to get your weigh in on that as someone who has voted with his feet to move away from someplace that's gone crazy to someplace that's still relatively sane, to see if you could give us your thinking on what lies before us as the fork in the road here as a country to choose, or as a world, to choose what we're going to do, how we're going to stand up. And Bill Holter, whom we interviewed just about a week ago, said he hopes that people will stand up this time and not just roll over as we did over the last 3 years.
Look, I think it's important to lay out a disclaimer, because whenever these types of discussions are brought up, it appears as though you're ganging up on the Democratic Party. I mean, this is not a political statement. I am, I grew up in a home where my parents were, in essence, hippies in the 70s. I mean, I grew up respecting different ideologies and different beliefs and different lifestyles. Never bothered me. My friends were my friends, no matter what their lifestyle was. That's just how it was, and never thought twice about it. And now everything certainly is upside down, and that is one of the things that has bothered me more than anything having to do with the BRICS or the loss potentially of the petro status, or the mismanagement of the world reserve currency, or the stupidity of weaponizing the dollar, or the stupidity of signing an executive order saying we're going green, which in essence antagonized Saudi Arabia. All of the things that we have done outside the country, bad enough. But as a country, we were always unified as a people. And we could, when our backs were against the wall, there was no problem in finding a resolution. That was the American way. And I find more, I have greater anxiety, I guess you could say. I find more that really upsets me in what's happening around the country. And that's a prime example. So, I mean, here a politician wants to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. And do you think the people who have perpetrated that gun violence are going to just simply adhere to you can't hold guns anymore, and give up their guns? It just makes no sense whatsoever. The guy who the escaped felon in Pennsylvania who broke into someone's home and stole a hunting rifle, that homeowner did indeed shoot at the felon 7 times, missed him. But what's he supposed to do when someone breaks into your home in the middle of the night? Pull out a golf club? Point of it is, the people who own firearms to use to protect their family understand very, very well exactly what they are used for and what it really means. I have a concealed permit as an example. And when you go take your concealed permit class, just for people who don't quite understand this, my officer was a Sing Sing correctional officer. And he said to me, and he said to the class, here's the deal. If you use your gun, you pull it out to kill someone, period. You never pull it out and wave it around and say, I have a gun, back up. You pull it out after you have exhausted every single opportunity to flee. And if you can't flee, and you can prove that in a court of law, then you pull out your gun and you use it to save your life or someone else's life who you're with, period. And you are held to a much, much higher standard. And you think real hard about that as someone who carries a gun or owns a precious metals company. And what's going to happen if I do that? Well, you're going to get arrested. That's number one, that they said. You are going to go to jail no matter what. That's what the gentleman who taught the class said. You will be arrested no matter what. You will go to jail. You have to be able to prove that you exhausted every opportunity to flee. And that's what it's for. It's not for any other reason but last resort. And I think it's deplorable that that would be considered a solution to a problem that, has nothing to do with lawfully owning and via permit a gun. And we see the same thing, this hypocrisy that we see in the state of Minnesota, as you mentioned, where I left, where, just the other day, and I can't pronounce her name. Her name is Shivanthi Sathanandan. Anyways, I mean, she is the DFL State Outreach and Inclusion Officer for the state of Minnesota, who was adamant and very outspoken about defunding the police. And she got carjacked in her driveway in front of her 4 children in Minneapolis, beaten. Her neighbors came to rescue her, and they were held up at gunpoint as well. And she's calling for the police to find these people. Yet what I'm getting at is that everything is upside down, and it bothers me to no end. And I think this is part of the greater picture that is not lost on our adversaries and on our allies, who are wondering, like many of us are, what the heck's going on with the U.S., the foundation of liberty and of justice and of respect for the law. These things are are more troubling to me, and this is not a political statement. This is about being a patriot in a country that has afforded me and my family opportunities that I pinch myself and can't even believe that we've been able to maximize. But I love this country, and I'm more disturbed by what I am seeing with the ripping of the fabric of this country and the fact that we aren't unified the way we were, like, for example, after World War II and the Great Depression, where we came back stronger than ever and made the world look at the United States as a place of, envious of what we had and how we went about our business and how we respected the public, the law, our families, religion. Everything that made this country great is now up in the air. And that to me is exactly what I'm talking about, whether it be in Minneapolis or in New Mexico. It's just making the wrong decisions and just ripping apart the fabric of what made this country great. And that's just my own personal opinion, but it goes hand in hand with everything we're talking about with BRICS and the de-dollarization and all of these things. In fact, it makes it that much more compelling as far as I'm concerned.
It's a good reminder, and it's something that Bill Holter has called for, again, asking all people to stand up and stand up for our beloved country here in the U.S., stand up for their beloved countries everywhere that they live in the world. The people have their heads on straight. Generally, it's those who have gone off the rails are not those who are busy trying to raise families and make businesses grow and things like that. So there's an opportunity and frankly a great need for people to stand firm and keep their feet on the ground and keep their heads on straight and do the right thing. So,
well, one last thing, look, the state of Minnesota, the top tax bracket's basically 10%. I didn't leave Minnesota for taxes. I would have stayed there and paid a stupid tax rate forever. I left there because they defunded the police. That's the biggest reason I left there, that they chose this agenda, this woke agenda, and vilified the police, who have a very difficult job where you have that much time to react if something happens. And are you going to think, or are you going to, end up jeopardizing your own life? And I had friends on the Minneapolis police force, one of whom had a nervous breakdown when all of this happened, quit the police force and went to work for his father's company because they were vilified to the point where they were afraid to get up in the morning, put on their uniform and do their job. And that to me was more disconcerting, where I couldn't go down to a Timberwolves basketball game and walk to my car at 10:30 at night without having a 9mm gun on my waist. Now that may sound dramatic, but there was a good couple of years in the state of Minnesota. I haven't been there for 2 years, but 2020, 2021, yes, in the middle of a pandemic, but I don't care. I mean, you go down to downtown Minneapolis back then, and what was a vibrant city was boarded up, burnt down, spray painted, and you wondered, am I in Beirut or am I in Minneapolis, where Little House on the Prairie and Mary Tyler Moore was filmed, where I spent 50 years and incredibly proud to be in a Minnesotan. And, look, I'm sure they've come back a lot, but the point of it is that, I didn't leave because the tax rate was stupid, which it is. I left because on top of a stupid tax rate, the politicians just seem to make really embarrassing decisions that I think made the laughingstock out of the state of Minnesota to be the leading force at defunding the police. And we should all be thankful for the police. You never realize how much you need them until you need them. And so, as a Minnesotan, I'd gladly say I'm sorry to the police department for what happened, but I voted with my feet. So enough on that. But yeah, I think it's important, Dunnigan. I think it goes hand in hand, part and parcel with what's happening outside the borders is what's happening inside. And you put it together, and it really becomes a much more compelling argument where the rest of the world can look at what we've done outside and say, well, they're still the best country in the world. They have law, they have order, they have respect. And those things are now starting to fly away. So that only reinforces my resolve for the things that we've been talking about for a few years now.
Right. And remember, everybody, to support your local sheriff, because the sheriff is the only law enforcement agent mentioned in the Constitution, and they work for the people, not for the governor, not for the mayor, etc. So back to banks, bullion, and BRICS. Any updates from you over the past week here on developments on either the banking stability or the BRICS currency developments?
Yeah, I mean, look, the national debt right now is up almost really darn close to $2 trillion since they raised the debt ceiling. And, it took almost 210 years to spend our first or to go into debt for our first 2 trillion. And we did it in, a few months. This is reaching a pace of stupidity, and it's going to begin to really affect the banks as well, I think, as rates continue to rise. And look, I think higher rates are going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy because a lot of these holders, this is what we're seeing continually, are switching their 1% or less yielding bank accounts to T-bills and that are yielding 5%. And that's why the banks have to sell their loss-making, long-duration treasuries just to be able to pay those deposits that are being withdrawn. And this will force constantly higher interest rates for those long-term treasuries, and thus much larger losses on the treasuries or these unrealized gains. The whole banking system will get obliterated. And if you look at what's happening, just last week, we saw on a seasonally adjusted basis that bank deposits plunged by another 70 billion just last week. And so even more concerning is that in 6 months' time, and this is mostly to the smaller banks in the United States, they need to find $108 billion, these banks, because the bank bailout funding program has to be paid back in 6 months. And so there is going to be a lot more in the way of fireworks with the banks. You're seeing money just flee out of the banks, but maybe even more leaving not only the reverse repo market, which all of the money market funds are going into from the regional banks, going into the commercial banks, into their money market programs, which are being allowed to invest in the overnight repo market, which they shouldn't be allowed to do. The Fed should have stopped that a long time ago. It really would have put a brake on the exodus out of the regional banks, because as we've said before, you get 1% or maybe 0.5% in a savings account in a regional bank with the ability to go to a commercial bank that's too big to fail, paying 5.5% in the money market with daily liquidity. Why would you stay in a regional bank? The best rate you can get in a regional bank carries a 1-year CD at under 5%, locked in for a year. No reason to stay there. But all the money leaving the commercial banks going directly to the Treasury and even draining down the overnight reverse repo market, the money in there pulling out, going directly to the Treasury because they're paying a higher rate than the 5.3% or thereabouts you're getting in the overnight repo market. You can get more than that in a 3-month Treasury. And, it's crazy because at the beginning of 2022, that 3-month Treasury was 0.06%, and now it's 5.5%, which is more than the overnight reverse repo market. It is draining the reserves from the banks, and it's a big deal. I truly believe it will be the catalyst for whatever comes next, and keep an eye on it. The end of the last chapter in the story of this banking crisis is far from being over. So, yeah, that's what I will stick to. It's going to be the catalyst for the next problem, and it's going to start right there with rates rising and money leaving the banks, making rates rise higher, which puts more pressure on the banks, and it's just going to obliterate the whole system.
I continue on a weekly basis, as do my sons, get clients approaching us who are, if they're having a major life event like a 401k rollover after leaving an employer or selling a home, that sort of thing, relocating, that they are not comfortable parking significant, several $100,000 or more of cash in a bank account for any period of time, and looking for safer places to preserve their nest egg than leaving in the bank. So that's a whole other factor that people are picking up on this and looking for safer havens.
Right. And I think that's what they ought to do. I mean, look, you're foolish to have lots of money in a regional bank, period. And, this is something that I really do believe, based upon what looks like the Federal Reserve aiding and abetting the exodus out of the banks, that this is something that they have drawn up. They want to cull the banks. They don't want 4,500 banks. they want 4 or 5 banks. And you do that, all it will take is one big bank like a Schwab or a PNC or any of these banks that are really very much in trouble. You look at Schwab as an example. Everyone's, oh, there's no way that'll happen. Well, they borrowed 130% of their assets in this funding program. It's due back in 6 months. Where's the money going to come from? I find it interesting that all of the money that was in TD Bank just went over to Schwab, or in their brokerage accounts over to Schwab, because they bought them or whatnot. All of these deposits will help reliquify Schwab, but is it just buying time? I'm not quite sure. But look, the bottom line is that there will be a big bank failure, a PNC or a Truist or a U.S. Bank or one of these banks, and they'll bail them in. And when that happens, I think you'll see chaos and panic unlike anything any of us have ever seen, because it was bad enough and scary enough when the banks were bailed out, as they should not have been. Read the Dodd-Frank law. That was not how it should have gone down, and it did. We've covered that, ad nauseum. But this time, I think you're going to see a bank bail-in. I've been pretty consistent with that. I think you'll see that, and when that happens, I think all bets are off. You'll see rates really rise then, because everyone's going to yank their money out in a fever pitch. And that goes back to what Kristalina Georgieva said, the head of the IMF, who said, the problem in the U.S. is the fact that people can move their money too quickly with the click of a mouse. Well, good luck this time. You see a bank bailed in and watch how fast that happens. And I think you will see a bank run like no one has ever imagined, which will immediately collapse not just 1 or 2 or 3, but a lot of banks, because there are people that are thinking about this, and they just forgot, and they haven't gone and done what they wanted to do. To transfer out takes some time, it takes some effort. Got to open up an account at a too big to fail bank or whatever it is. And I think that will light a fuse not only under the banking system, but certainly under a lot of people's feet.
When you mentioned the quote from Kristalina Georgieva, it's a good clue and a reminder to all of us that when someone in an elite leader position says something that says that they think the problem is that people have freedom, or people can take care of their own lives, or people have privacy, that's a good clue that they did I say that out loud? Might be a good time to take that to heart and take action. How about Andy, you also research on an ongoing basis the development of the BRICS Plus nations. Any awarenesses or developments there we should be aware of?
I think it's kind of a big one. And, I read a lot of articles about it. I try to read the ones that come out of the mainstream, because I like to get the pushback. Part of what I think anyone who has an argument must be able to do is to, with an open mind, look at both sides. And that's part of what's lacking in this country, right? Where you can't have a discussion without it becoming heated, where you can't respect someone else's viewpoint. And if you never do that, you never learn, you never grow. You have to listen. It's like going to an attorney because you're falsely accused of murder, and the attorney doesn't even study the prosecution's case. We don't need to know that. The defense is all that matters. No, that's not true. You need to know both sides of the story, especially if your life counts on it or depends on it. But I think a lot of the stories I read talk about, China and India just simply do not like each other. And the problems with Kashmir are something that can't be overlooked, that they won't be able to get by it. And the bottom line is simply this, is that I do believe in many cases, a lot of these countries are looking past their history with one another. I mean, look, you don't have to go any farther than looking between Iran and Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia. A railway being built between Iran and Iraq, and embassies being built in Saudi Arabia and Iran between the two countries, and relations being restarted and on a friendly basis. The fact that these countries are now part of the BRICS naval alliance, these countries who never got along. So why is it so hard to believe that China and India can get past this? And, one of the articles that I read that's gotten no attention whatsoever is the fact that Xi Jinping and Modi spent time on the sidelines at the BRICS meeting in a way to seek resolution for the tensions along this Himalayan border. And in fact, they agreed to direct, both leaders agreed to direct relevant officials to intensify efforts at expeditious disengagement and de-escalation. I think that, if these countries are serious about doing what they're doing, and it sure seems like they are, two things will be prevalent. One, these things will be fixed. And two, the information that we will get from the mainstream Western media will never be accurate. And after the fact, they'll be like, geez, how did that happen? And if you really look at the poor job that the Western media has done telling us any of this stuff, why would we believe that this is something that can't get done? Who would have ever thought that Saudi Arabia and Iran would mend fences, or Iran and Iraq? Who would have ever thunk it, right? And these are the things that I think, we're not being told clearly. That's a real big one to me. And then, you look at the fact that, India bought a large oil shipment from Abu Dhabi with Indian rupee, not US dollars. So these things are starting to happen. And I think when you see Xi Jinping say that it's necessary for the BRICS to promote and reform the international monetary financial system, it's real. And maybe that's why Kristalina Georgieva flew the next day to China to meet with Xi Jinping. I mean, these are big statements coming out of the BRICS nations. And so one other thing, and I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but I think it's big. Look, James Rickards is one of the smartest guys out there, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for him. I think the only mistake he made was by saying that the BRICS would come out with their gold-backed currency August 22nd and saying that the SCO and the Eurasian Economic Union would combine at the meeting. I have believed that both things would happen, and I've been very, very adamant about that for years, since we started talking about this. We would always talk about those two groups. Neither happened. As far as the currency goes, we know that the finance ministers were tasked with, really hashing this out and thinking about it and coming back to the next meeting with their findings. It will happen. And then as far as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union, they will join. And now what we just saw is Belarus, the president of Belarus, is proposing to hold a joint summit between the BRICS 11, the new 6 countries plus the original BRICS members, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, to specifically discuss the convergence of these multilateral organizations. And you will see them join together. And when you see this continuing growing and adhesion and cohesion of all of these countries between the Belt Road, the BRICS, the SCO, the Eurasian Economic Union, it becomes incredibly formidable. The old saying, safety in numbers, has never been more true. And yeah, I think that's something to pay very close attention to. It will happen. And, when you think about it, look, in the span of 1 year, Iran has been formally admitted into the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Do you think our sanctions mean one damn thing to them anymore? They're selling their oil to China for yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And their network of countries that they are now part of comprise, a very large portion of human population and of GDP and of military might. And so, as I've said before, logarithmic decay, or the game of Jenga, little by little by little by little by little by little by little, until finally it's all at once. And where are we on that curve? I don't know, but you can see, even when things really aren't happening under the surface, they are happening. So not a ton to talk about. Iran bought a whole bunch of gold over the last few months, over the last 5 months, over 4 tons of gold. Saudi Arabia's exports and their treasury holdings both simultaneously have fallen to a 6-year low here in where the public is running headlong into U.S. treasuries, and China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia are dumping them. It's a little ominous that the world is dumping treasuries, but the U.S. citizens are running headlong into them. I think that's pretty much it. Let me just see if I have any other notes. Total of 23 countries have formally submitted their application for the BRICS. 22 have informally. So we will see a whole bunch more of the world sign on formally as we get closer to next year's meeting. They have come out again and said that the BRICS alliance is discussing the prospects of creating a single unit currency. Here's a new one. Russian officials recently revealed that Moscow and Tehran were considering the use of a gold-backed Persian Gulf stablecoin for oil purchases. Here again, we're seeing gold being used with blockchain. This is something that we've been talking about for 3 years now. This will happen. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization called for a gold-backed settlement currency for the entire Eurasian continent. The Russian finance minister said it will be a gold and commodity-backed BRICS settlement currency. Put it all together. Why was gold reclassified tier 1? Why are the banks buying so much? Who produces and accumulates the most? The RICS and BRICS. You keep hearing little by little by little by little. Couple more things. JP Morgan just put out a report saying that China currently holds 96% of the global copper inventories, 75% of the global aluminum inventories. Do you think it's strange that 75% of all the aluminum disappeared off the London Metals Exchange last year and 90% of the zinc? Where do you think it's going? Oh, yeah, China holds 75% of it, 70% of all the corn. What was the deal just struck between Brazil and China? Oh, yeah, that will only sell you our corn as the second largest exporter of corn in the world, Brazil is, in yuan. 54% of the global wheat supply, 30% of the global soybeans, 22% of the global crude oil. This is from JP Morgan. And this is a communist country, probably doesn't tell us everything. And so, do you see what we are running into? We are running into an organization that is using commodities, just like Zoltan Pozsar said Bretton Woods 3 would be, a system dominated by commodities. And all of the countries that are joining, like Argentina, the largest producer of natural gas in South America. And so when you talk about all of this stuff, it's becoming very, very real. One last piece, I promise. So, you talk about this group. We just mentioned how they have the natural resources like the grains and the soybeans and the rare earths and the uranium and the titanium and the aluminum and the gold. But we've also said they possess two of the three largest nuclear arsenals, but now they control the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz between Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Iran, the Suez Canal with Egypt, the Straits of Magellan with Argentina, and a large portion of the Eurasian continent landmass with Russia, China, and Iran. They now have the 5th, 10th, 11th, 18th, and 23rd largest economies in the world, along with 5 others. And so little by little by little, this is becoming real. And you wouldn't know that if all you did was watch the mainstream. So I appreciate you giving me this forum for the last 3 years. And it was always gratifying to be early talking about this. Now it's becoming concerning that it's happening and that most people don't have a clue of what it really means. And there's an old saying that you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And I hope that our talks every week, just little by little, start to affect people who have never heard of this stuff before, and they do their own due diligence and they dig in and they look at this, because this will become very real all at once. Until then, it's going to be a story that continues to follow this linear progression of events, as we talked about it 3 years ago. And then all of a sudden it'll become real and a religious experience, I think, for a lot of people who are ill-prepared to experience the kind of change that this could usher in. So I'll get off my soapbox, but yeah, every single week, Dunnigan, there's more stuff to talk about, and there will be next week too. But this is something that is gaining momentum, that's for sure.
It's I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it has to do with recency and normalcy bias that we've talked about quite often, that we actually get some rather crusty comments underneath our live chats or even under the videos after they come out recorded thereafter, saying, oh, nothing new here, same old, every week, same old. It's like when a global pivot away from the US dollar and the forging of alliances and unprecedented moves on the part of former US allies, et cetera, becomes the new normal. Well then, how do you think that's going to play out if that keeps continuing? So anyway, just to say, folks, that's the old quote. After all, it's not new. It's like, well, all right, it may not be new at this point because we've been talking about it for 3 years and it's been going on longer than that, but it is important and it's real and it's going to affect all of us, and that direction is not changing, it's only accelerating. All right, how about the bullion market? That's our original market update.
Well, last week, Monday, we saw all-time highs in the second and third largest economies in the world in gold, with Japan and China. You have gold up in, if you look at it, there's a indice, and all you need to do is put a dollar sign in front of XAU WCU. This is a basket of currencies and economies from the 20 largest economies in the world. And over the last 5 years in this indice, gold's up almost 60%. It's up almost 10% this year alone. And what that tells us is that gold is doing its job for the majority of the world. It's just the dollar and its inordinate strength, which, if you really think about it, is it really justified, or is it just the nicest shirt in the dirty laundry basket? And, we really don't see things quite as clearly here because of the strength of the dollar, but I assure you the rest of the world does. And when you see gold up 60% in 5 years, when you see it up 10% this year, in every other currency, when you see it at all-time highs in the second and third largest economies in the world, it is real. And if you think about this is why most people say these things, nothing new, blah, 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 because they are not looking broadly enough at what's exactly happening. And, if people think a country that is 155 trillion in debt with 5 trillion in assets, that is splintered all around its unification around the country and is being methodically de-dollarized around the world is really something that should be or deserves to be as strong as it is, well, then I guess they won't get out of the way of what's coming. They won't even know that it's coming. But if you think about it, when we pride ourselves at being the world reserve currency and our 155 trillion in debt, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military, pensions, on top of the 32 trillion, with 5 trillion in assets, the largest being student debt of over 40%. Should we really be as strong of a currency as we are? And that's why you see gold up 60% around the rest of the world in the last 5 years. So right now, ironically, because of this recency bias and this normalcy bias, it's, I think, probably the best environment to buy gold and silver we've seen in 4 years. And price, premium, availability, and the reasonings to do it. And sometimes I feel like, I'm screaming at a wall. And because, the mainstream hasn't awoken yet. And I will say it again. The mainstream's going to wake up when a bank is bailed in. And I would bet anyone $1,000, anyone, that we will see a bank bail in, I want to say before the end of this year, but for sure before the election, we will see bank bail-ins. And when that happens, that's when the public wakes up, because everything we've ever talked about is not enough to make people pull their head up out from underneath their checkbook and their computer screen to say, my goodness, what do we do now? And when you see your neighbor lose all their money above the FDIC limit, which is a joke, by the way, the 125 billion in assets backing 18 trillion in deposits, when they lose everything, people will say, now what? And that's when everything that we've talked about regarding availability and premium and price, and that's when it will all come true. So right now, it's just a great time if you're so inclined to add to your portfolio. And if nothing else, these are very interesting times that bear keeping an eye on, because things are changing everywhere we look, here and abroad, and don't seem to show any signs of abating. I mean, just the other day, the Biden administration canceled, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 permits for drilling for oil in Alaska. So, as oil is getting more expensive, as we've drained the strategic petroleum supply of oil, as Russia and Saudi Arabia are decreasing production and exports, as Saudi Arabia is selling us the least amount of oil they have in 6, all of these things are happening, and we are killing our own energy independence here. This is what I mean about doing the wrong things at the wrong time. And all of these things are not lost upon the rest of the world, who are making decisions to choose sides. And you can see it. So anyways, that's the deal. That's all I have for this week as far as specials. I think we have three. We have a resumption of the last two from last week, the 1/10 ounce Gold Eagle at $37.50 over its melt value. Take the price of gold, divide by 10 at $37.50. We have a combination of the Nordic Mint, which are now IRA approved, silver bars, both 5 and 10 ounce. If you buy 5 of each or more, $1.89 over spot on those, and $1.99 over spot on the Valcambi kilos. My favorite kilo bars come in boxes of 15, serialized with certificates of authenticity matching the number stamped on the bars. Look, basically everything's on sale right now, Dunnigan. So good stuff to choose from and good availability, low premiums. And in my mind, the world is worse off today than it was in 2020 when everything went haywire. So I guess maybe I just see things a little earlier than I should, or maybe I just see around corners. But I don't think we're out of the woods even by a long shot. So that's it. That's all I got for you today.
Well, Andy, we always appreciate your presence here with us. People look forward to. I get texts. Is Andy going to be on tonight? Is he going to be there tonight? Is it going to be live or is it going to be recorded? So just so you know, they start rattling my cage Monday actually, and then it really ramps up on Tuesday. So
I'd never miss it. If I miss it, it's because something big comes up. But I enjoy this. I have for the last 3 years, and it's just an honor to be here, really, and to have an association and a relationship with such a fine organization as Liberty and Finance, and you and your sons. And I look forward to it each week and look forward to it again next week, too. So God willing, I'll be here, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about, and always willing to do a live stream whenever you feel the urge to talk to the people. I'm game also.
Well, thanks for joining us again, Andy.
Stay well, buddy.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.